Hello everyone, this is the Grim Reader. I'm not going to do a full what I'm reading thing because I'm not quite there yet. But I am on page, whoa, I made it to 600 of the Effingers, this big fantastic novel. I've decided it is fantastic just because it's so epic. It's by this, I think she was Jewish herself, and it's just sort of sold as the Jewish Buddenbrooks or something. And she wrote it in 1951, or finished it in 1951. I'm sure it took her longer than that. It started in the 1900s, before, like the 1870s maybe, I think. And now we're in the time just after the First World War. 1918, I think we're still in 1918. And so it's going to move on into it's going to end in the 40s, and it's a Jewish family, so we know it's going to be probably pretty sad at the end. But one thing I wanted to just mention to give you an example of, one of the things that she is very good at in a very general way is, I would say, and that's what has made the war stuff quite interesting, is kind of making the historical events come to life for the people whose characters we know by now, and how each of them, it is very, very sort of episodic, and it tracks all the different people in the two families, or it hones in on a group of them. Some of them recede into the background, never to return, and some of them were always in the background, but she does a pretty good job of moving around between the different people, and there are quite a few of them. And one thing that came to life for me, and it did kind of remind me that I am very interested in the First World War and all the things went down. But what I liked about her depiction of it is it moves away from the sort of, I don't want to call it a cliche, because it really was. I mean, trench warfare was a thing, and it was terrible, but it does seem to be what it's mainly focused on, and shell shock and poisonous gas, and like that German movie that came out that was it was a film version of All Quiet on the Western Front, which is, to be honest, a book I need to read. I need to add it to my TBR. I've never read the book. And Remarque, what was his name? Eric Marie Remarque. He was also someone who went to California, like Brecht and Thomas Mann. And interesting. And so yeah, it's funny how that really is the only book I know of him. He's only known for that book. And so you could kind of get a somewhat limited scope of the impact of the First World War, or at least I do, as someone who's somewhat knowledgeable about it, but not in the details, and I'm not an expert at all. But it has made me more interested in it. And so in her depiction of it all, we get the fact that everyone at home suffered quite severely from the lack of food. They were very narrow, they were very limited in what they had access to, and these were well-off people. They were forced to eat Kohlrüben, so root vegetables of a kind, but not cabbage. Kohlrüben as opposed to Kohlköpfe, the heads of something, and sort of root vegetables, things are probably pretty, easily available. And they weren't starving at all, but they were not well nourished. I mean, I'm thinking this is the well-off people. So I guess across the board in Germany, lack of good food was a thing in the First World War. And I never really, of course I knew about it from the Second World War, but I guess this is almost like a call out to my viewers or whoever runs across this video. And I know that, I forget her name, Jen, she loves the First World War stuff. I want your recommendations on, it's becoming another thing that I'm turning it into another project, is First World War, just to read up on it a little bit more, because it is fascinating. And it reminds me, isn't there a book by Barbara Tuchman, The Guns of something, or that there's a Tuchman book about the war, which is probably more the British aspects, or maybe not. I think my husband listened to it on an audiobook, Barbara Tuchman, the one who wrote about the 14th century in A Distant Mirror. I forget the name of that one. So yeah, any recommendations you have about First World War? Not too much interested in, well, actually maybe I am interested in the military stuff. I mean, in the German context, the end of it was very much this whole mythology of the knife in the back legend that somehow has to do with, I'm trying to think if I can remember the Dolchstolz legende, something about how some higher ups kind of gave up and didn't follow through with what they were supposed to do. I forget what it was about, but yeah, Hindenburg, yeah, it's all coming back to me. So, but I liked how her perspective is, first off, the people in the town, the Berlin and everything are starving, and then she kind of goes to what different people in her cast of characters, their own experiences in the war. None of them have a trench experience. She decided not to do that. I'm trying to think if I'm remembering. The main one I remember is the sort of the golden child of one of the main characters. His name is James. Even though he's German, they gave him the name James. Maybe she thought that sounded like a golden child name. And he's very good looking, and he's a bit of a womanizer, always chatting up the ladies. And he has this really interesting, pleasant almost war experience where he goes off. He's in the Balkan areas, and specifically on trains a lot, and hanging out on trains and being in charge of train stuff. The train stuff almost reminded me of Dr. Zhivago a little bit, because we know, if you've read that novel, trains play a big part in that, big long train rides. So he was in the war, and it's the way it's described, it's almost like they sat around and played games. He was very good about, he was someone who was in charge of getting food, or trying to get food from places, or not just food, but other things. He was always trying to get rustle up stuff. Reminds me of a character in Catch-22. I know I'm jumping around. I apologize. The war stuff, war books. And it's sort of such a different kind of, he was almost like, oh, it was a good time. Like, he's nostalgic for his wartime experience because it was more or less pretty. And he has, of course, he makes friends with the locals, and he has a local girlfriend, or, a Slavic, an Eastern European girlfriend. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and it made me realize how narrow, how kind of superficial in a way my knowledge of First World War is. I have that movie, the little sort of cliches you've heard about. It's not a cliche, it really did happen, but the Christmas Eve peace time thing where they held off and sang songs and had a nice time for one night, and then they went back to war. So things like that get lodged in our brains, but they kind of you don't get the broad sweep of everything. So that was the first thing that I thought was interesting. And then connected to that, after the war, the Spanish flu, which apparently, I didn't know this. And I'm also interested if you know any kind of books that you can recommend about the epidemic of the Spanish flu, which I know kind of came into more discussion during COVID. But I didn't know that it actually originated in Kansas. It's not the Spanish flu, it's the American flu. It's the Kansas flu. And I don't know exactly why there. And then the reason why it turns into the Spanish flu is because of wartime censorship. So all the Allies and everyone squelched it, and the Germans, due to censorship rules to do with the war. It had started and was going around during the war. It went to Europe basically because of the mobilization of the Americans in the war, I guess. They went over there and they took it with them. And so that's how it spread. And then, but because of censorship, no one let on, or not enough people, so that it really became a thing. Plus people were preoccupied with the war, I guess. And then it goes to Spain, and it really does a number there too. And they were not a part in that war, in the First World War. And so the censorship rules weren't there. So everyone talks about it, and it gets reported on. And so it's as if it turns into this thing that, oh, that's where it started. But it's not true. It was somewhere else, and it went there. It's another example of how, like, rules of engagement regarding media transmission can really kind of do a number on how something is passed along, a news event. And I thought that was interesting too, and it just made me realize, again, that's another area I don't really know that much about. And I do think epidemic stuff is fascinating, especially, with COVID and post-COVID stuff. So that's just a little insight into, it's become really sort of quite exciting now with all the war stuff and the post-war stuff and the messing around, the messiness of Germany after the war, revolution, no revolution, and now we're getting into Weimar, the beginnings of Weimar. Still at the beginning, just the beginnings of Weimar, and really interesting. So I thought that I would share that with you guys. So if you have any recommendations. I'm not interested in media. I want books, and I think I want non-fiction or fiction is fine. So First World War stuff, your favorites, and then also stuff about the Spanish flu, if you've read anything that you could recommend. And yeah, that's all I have for you right now in my little hotel room here, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.